John, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Romero, and I'm a video game designer, and I am in Galway, Ireland.
Love it. And I was curious, like, did you always imagine yourself doing some kind of creative or technical role growing up? Obviously, you started quite young, but was it something that you were always driven towards, even at a young age?
But when I was really young, I drew. I basically was drawing all kinds of stuff that, eventually was drawing comics, but at the beginning it was just drawing. At the time, it was semi trucks, like 18-wheeler type trucks, because it was the 70s and that was the hotness back then. So I used to draw, just draw, stuff from back then, cartoons and all that. But yeah, I've always been creative, and eventually that kind of led into programming and making games because, I just love playing games and decided, hey, can't I just make games? But yeah, when I was really young, I was, drawing because we didn't have any money, and I didn't have hardly any toys. So I just did what was most interesting. So instead of playing with 20 pieces of wood that would be like in different combinations, drawing was way more interesting to me. So I kind of started with that.
I love that. Just a quick side story. I promise it's leading somewhere, but for me, same thing. Like growing up, didn't have much money. Lived in like shared same bedroom as my mom growing up, and all my friends had computers. I was obsessed with Doom. I was 11 years old, and in '93, and yeah, that was one of those things that I ended up deciding I want to buy a computer. So I sold all the artwork that I had been drawing, and hassle people on a bus stop or on a train and strangers, whoever I could, just to get $450 to buy a 386 so I could play Doom. Turns out I got ripped off. It was a 286, not a 386. So I could only play Wolfenstein, which I was already obsessed with. But that was a bit of the catalyst for me, was getting into like deluxe paint and doing pixel by pixel artwork, just so I could replace all the maps, characters, textures inside of Wolfenstein to look more gritty and more inspired by Doom and games like that. That kind of led down a path of getting into 3D, and I think my first job was Half-Life, which was a good way to start my career, I guess. But but it was always having like those catalysts of either limitations of like, I can't do that, so I want to figure out how to do it, or just being really inspired by certain games or other genres. For you, I was just kind of curious, like, was there a catalyst for you to get into games that kind of drove you?
Well, first I'd say that's really incredible, the similarities between, our paths, like starting out with nothing and then trying to get somewhere. For me, the catalyst was, it was super lucky, but I loved video games. I was playing video games as much as I could, and it cost money, and I was 11 and had like, hardly any money. This is just before I got a paper route to just get money. And I think I was mowing lawns at the time for money. And luckily, my friend came and saw me, just came to my house in the summertime and said, I just found a way that we could play games that cost no money. I'm like, no way. So I just jumped on my bike. He didn't tell me where it was. And I just followed him all the way to the local college and rode our bikes over to the computer lab, went inside expecting to see video games. And instead we see terminals. And he gets on one of the terminals, and he had a user account, username and password from a neighbor 2 doors down from him, and basically got on there and started to log in and started showing me these text games. And it was like, oh, these are totally different. Like, I don't have to hurry. I can just spend my time thinking about what the next move is, like chess, And then I saw that there were some students in there, and I was like, what are they doing? Are they playing games too? And he's like, no, they're programming. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, well, they're programming, like they could make that game. They're telling a computer like how to make something. I'm like, I want to do that. So it was like, I could make games. I could tell the computer what I want to do. So that to me was like, like a creative explosion. I already know I want to make a bunch of different games, or I would like a lot of different games to play. But the fact that you can actually create it, it is a weird, like, big bang thing that goes off in your head, like the knowledge that you could actually do that. And it was funny because to me, I never thought in my whole life, I've never thought I wouldn't be able to do something. Because to me, I'm like, well, a human did that. Why couldn't I do it? If some other human did it, I can do it. Absolutely. I just need to spend my time figuring it out.
That's great. I'm curious about that too. Do you think that having that naivete sometimes pans out for the greater good rather than overthinking everything and starting to think about the logistics up front instead of saying, I want to do that, how do I do it? Not, hey, that's going to be really technical. Hey, that's going to be a huge time investment.
Yeah, like I didn't second guess the fact that I could do it or not. It was just like, well, obviously I can. If they can, I can. So let me figure out how do I do it. Games are made by people. I am a person. I should be able to do it just like them. I didn't care that they were in college. I didn't feel like there was a big difference. It was just like I was just on a computer typing stuff. They're typing stuff. It's just different stuff. Let me figure out what the stuff is that they're typing. You know. So yeah, in jumping into like making stuff, like when we were making, I making games during the 8-bit era on Apple IIs, or even making games together at id Software. We just started making a game. We had the idea, which took probably 10 minutes, and then we just started making it. And there were no prototypes. We just made games, and we knew what the game would end up like. So we just burned through it because it was only a couple months. I mean, you can't make a gigantic, epic thing that is unknowable at the beginning. It's like, it better be knowable because we're finishing really fast. So,
Right.
so we were used to just going and doing. Later, obviously, with bigger games, you have to do a lot more planning. But at the very beginning, it was really great training wheels to just jump in and just make things.
Exactly. Just get in, get your hands dirty, break stuff, and see what happens. I was curious, just while we're on the topic of putting money into games, just your opinion, do you think that video games changed a lot when they weren't driven by pumping quarters in and killing you off versus longevity and making a solid game?
Yeah. What's interesting is I feel that the death of the arcade happened when continue happened because you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that before. It was like you put a quarter in and you go until your all your lives are gone, and now it's like shit, I gotta start over again. As soon as continue happened, that the pay to win is what that turned into.
That's
And
right.
that just kind of killed high scores. It killed the tournaments. It killed all of the stuff that made the arcades super competitive when people were doing those things. And it's nice to keep going, but it also was like, yeah, but you had to get really good to not have to do that. I think that happened in response to the fact that home computers were now a thing and people are starting to spend more time on home computers playing games, and like they're trying to keep people in the arcade by like doing that. And they probably knew it was a big violation, but
Exactly, but money, you working at Softdisk and working with some of your colleagues and deciding to venture off and create a company, what was that like at the time? I'm kind of curious whether there was any hesitation or, again, like most people starting a company is, hey, this is a lot of responsibility. But again, if it's following the genre of what we're talking about, maybe it's, hey, let's go do this thing. So like, what was that experience like first deciding, hey, why don't we go do it ourselves?
having already had experience starting companies for me was helpful for me not to worry about starting. It was my fourth game company, so I'd already started one myself. Then I started one with a co-founder, and then a third one with a co-founder, and then it was with four of us. So at that point, like when I saw the dangerous Dave and copyright infringement side scrolling happen, that was instantaneously the start of the company. Like I knew it. There was no other way that it was going to go. It had to be, we need to get out of here because this is world-changing tech. And this place, people won't see it if we do it here. We have to do it somewhere else. So like we really had to do it. And I had experience starting companies already with other people. That was the perfect time to do it. But we couldn't just jump out immediately. Like number one, I had, it was almost like I made a promise to Al Lacovius at Softdisk that I'm going to do this new product. He didn't want me to leave, and that's why we started doing Gamer's Edge. So I felt like I owed him something there. I couldn't just leave after I started a few months, 2 months ago, So like that would be horrible to do that. So it was like, let's make something and see if it does well using this tech. And if it does, then we'll leave. But we have to like also take care of Softus. So that happened. We made the Keen. We got money. The money was like, yep, we can actually leave. And then I had a talk with Al and promised that we would cover the next whole year of development as we leave to start our journey together. there was tension there. Tom Hall was worried because he'd never done anything like that, and he was worried that Softdisk was gonna go after him or something. But it's like, no, I'll have a talk with Al. It's gonna be okay. And it was. We almost had a business opportunity with Al where he could have started a company separate and had us in there, and he could have run the business, but his internal people went, nope, you can't do that. So yeah, we had to do it on our own. And the idea was just too good not to do this. It was smart. Like the way that things worked out was just so lucky that we didn't start it with Al, that we actually did go on our own, because we were making our own decisions at that point, not being hindered by somebody who had another success and didn't understand the new market of shareware and the way that kind of stuff worked. So that was really lucky. And there were other things that happened that were super lucky that we didn't do, that we could have done, several of them, and we just like thread the needle, we totally got lucked out several times.
That's great. I like the idea too of initially testing the market under Softdisk, let's say, putting out some stuff and saying, okay, cool, it is well received. This just reaffirms what we want to do, so that way you can double down without that hesitation of, going down a tunnel, hoping that there's an exit on the other side, of several months of development, just to see whether or not, hey, is this going to work, or am I going back to Al to knock on the door and beg forgiveness?
And it was 2.5 months, so it wasn't that bad. That wasn't that deep of an investment for us. Was our time after work, but it wasn't like, all right, everybody pitch in tons of money. It was just, let's do this thing.
That's great. With id Software, what was the first big success that you guys had?
Commander Keen. It was massive. And it's funny because of Doom and Quake that overshadows everything because of how massive those things were. Before then, our successes were massive before that point. Like Commander Keen, I have like some of the reviews from 1990 when Commander Keen came out for the first time, and like we were making the PC do something it had never done since it existed in 1981. Since August of 81, no one had done this before, and for the first time they get to see it with the hardware that they already had, which is incredible, right? They didn't have to buy a new card. The reviews were just like, the PC is now a Nintendo, everybody, it's a new world, and so it was really, we were very excited that other people saw the potential in what the PC could do, and it just took, a lot of assembly language to make that happen. So, the second Commander Keen series that came out in December of 1991, that the internal technology was super different. Nobody would be able to tell at all, but that's the game that people remember. That's the Commander Keen that people remember as number 4, which was the shareware one. Mm-hmm. And we just, everything just kept on, like we kept on putting these games out, and income kept stacking. It's like it didn't stop with the first game. It kept on coming in, and then the second game. And then we could start working on Wolfenstein. And then, then that was insane. Like when Wolfenstein came out, it was huge. So things went really nuclear with Wolf, like a 5x, at least minimum 5x Commander Keen. And then Doom was just another planet.
To talk about Wolfenstein just briefly, I guess, did you guys know early on, like, hey, this is going to be its own genre? This is going to kind of change the way that we do everything? I mean, just in general, like, did you going to have that gut feeling that, hey, this is going to splinter off to be its own category in a lot of ways?
Nope. No, we didn't. We at that time, we knew that Wolfenstein was the best 3D maze game that we had seen, because since 1974, every 3D game was a maze. It was a 90-degree corner maze. Might and Magic, Ultima, Wizardry, you name it, the game, Dungeon Master, like there's so many of them, and they're all 90-degree mazes, right? That's, you're playing in a maze. To us, we knew that it was the best maze game that we've played, and for us, it was just a 3D game. Shooter wasn't even a word, for us, because so many games in the past were, say, Battlezone 1980 was like shooting, it's shooting stuff. You could have called that a shooter, and MIDI maze. And all these other games, there were RPGs where you weren't shooting, but yeah, it was just a 3D game, and it was like the maze game was like a massive genre in the 80s. Like, I don't think people called it the genre, but it was an absolute genre. And to be first person was amazing, because most maze games were all top down. And so to make a 3D maze game was a big deal. And with Wolfenstein, the smooth movement, the smooth moving through a level, that only happened with Wolfenstein. No one had ever seen that before because it's always on the grid. You're always moving on a grid. I got to say, there was only one game that did not move on a grid, and it was 1982, a game called Way Out on the Apple II. It did move smoothly, like Wolfenstein, but it didn't look as good as Wolfenstein because it was on an 8-bit Apple II, but the technology was there for that smooth movement and turning smoothly, all of that. But Wolfenstein's VGA and all that. It was massive, but we did not think that there was a genre happening. We just thought it was a 3D maze game, and it was the best one we'd seen. And we knew it was going to do well. We knew it was going to do well. When I'm on the floor laughing because of the sound effects of the chain gun, I knew it was going to win.
Yeah, I didn't get a Sound Blaster card for a long time, so and I still, in a way, get really nostalgic about PC Speaker. Hearing the chain gun, especially with the sound, with an actual Sound Blaster or 8-bit card, kind of changed things. I guess while you're talking about mazes, I think it's been a long time, but E1 M10, the Pac-Man level.
Yeah.
So was that an easy transition, saying, "Hey, let's go make a maze and fill it with ghosts"?
Yeah, that happened at night because back then we worked a lot. And we had a Pac-Man machine right there. It was the only arcade machine we had. Like, we had a 1-bedroom apartment for the office for the company, and we had a Pac-Man machine there because that was like my favorite game of all time back then. We're playing Pac-Man. It's probably midnight or something. Bobby Prince is in the office, and I was just like, I was gonna make the secret level, and I was like, wait a minute, this could actually work. It'd be hilarious to see Nazis in a maze with the ghosts, and then it's like Pac-Man, but with Nazis. So I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I told Adrian, dude, you got to make Inky, Pinky, Blinky, and Clyde. You got to do it right now. And Bobby, you need to make a version of the Pac-Man song that I can play, during that level. It'll be hilarious. So he did a jazzy version of it. Adrian just pumped out those ghosts in probably 10 minutes. And I just made the maze, which is really simple. I mean, it's a very well-known maze, and he did the dots. So anyway, yeah, it was really quick and easy. I think I got it done that night. It was just within hours it was done. And but it was just like, it's an homage, right, to my favorite game back then.
No, that's great, and it's such a welcome surprise from killing Nazis in World War II, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what is this?
I'm in Pac-Man.
Yeah. To jump on Doom, so it's official, Doom Guy. I think you knighted that name a couple of years back. I think it's 2019 because it was right after that the second Doom movie, which was interesting, came out, and I was actually talking with the director Tony Gigolo about it, and he kept correcting me that it's not Doom Guy. And I think it was like a few weeks later that you officially put that out, and I was like saying, see, for you. What was that experience like coming off of Wolfenstein and Spirit Destiny and deciding, hey, let's turn things up another notch? Like, what was the experience in the early days of Doom?
Let's see. First, I didn't knight Doom Guy. That's just kind of what he became, like what he was called. But internally, that's what we called him because
well, I guess reaffirming.
Yeah.
After 20, 30 years of debate, just kind of saying, no, it's official, it's Doom Guy. So, because I've always known it as Doom Guy as well.
It is, yeah, totally. To make the game in November of '92, we'd already made Wolfenstein. We made Spirit Destiny. John does some research on what the next engine could be by modifying Wolfenstein and making it more advanced, but it was at a dead end. Still cool tech. So we licensed it to Raven so they could make Shadowcaster. But at the same time, we're like, what's our next game? What are we going to do next? This is like, it's a new game. It's not like, let's make a sequel to Wolfenstein. We already did that. It's a prequel. It's Spirit Destiny. We're done. Next game. Like, we didn't just dwell on a game. This time, we decided that we're going to mine our D&D experiences because we've been playing D&D for years with John. And the end of his D&D campaign, and it ended when demons overran the entire planet and killed everyone. And it's like, what if we did something where demons overran, Earth or whatever? That would be an interesting game. It's like, well, let's do it. Let's do it on a moon of somewhere. It's gonna be in the future. So in the future, let's not be on Earth. Let's be somewhere else. And we called it Titanga. That was the name of the base back then. And so yeah, we came up with this idea of like there's a Marine, they're doing, he's on a base where they're doing experiments, opens up a portal to hell, which is not ever anything that you expect in the future. You think aliens are coming through a wormhole, not the fact that hell exists in a technological future, right? It's not what people expect. People always expect aliens from space. And we thought it would be really cool to change it up and have hell come for the future Space Marines. So we wrote that up into a Doom Bible, and then we went on vacation, and we come back in January. We've been thinking about all of we even made a bullet point list of all of the things that this engine was going to do, because John, even in November, decided, I am not going to go forward with that Wolfenstein tech. I need brand new technology, and I need to have walls that are not 90 degrees to each other. It needs to be free moving at walls at basically a line segment. I should be able to render a line segment wall. So he thought about that data structure and how he would do it, and came up with a really good, tight, compact data structure that would work for an entire world. Told that to us, to me and Tom, and now we're envisioning what we could do with it, and we're coming up with a bullet point list, one of which was multiplayer. Another one that was critical was that we were going to open up the game to modders because of Wolfenstein not being open, and people made it open.
Yep.
So we're like, we need to open. Yeah, exactly. We need to open this game up and make it really easy. So, multiplayer, modding, cool idea, but with an advanced engine no one had seen before. And because we were so high off 1992 with Wolfenstein just beating everything, we were on Usenet. And there's a top 100 list on Usenet, the top 100 games every week. We were on top of that list for 1992 after Wolfenstein. Well, actually for all of it, because Keen was number one for years, right? Or for at least a year and a half. Wolfenstein comes out, now it's number one. And it stayed number one until Myst came out. And then Doom came out, and it came back after we were back up to number one. But because we felt like invincible pretty much, we were making really fun games the way that we want to make them. We felt really confident that the new design was going to just blow people's minds with multiplayer, and what people could do with an open game that's easy to mod. Just the variety of what you would see out of our executable would be crazy. So we put out a press release at the beginning of January saying it's going to be the best game in the world. And that's nuts. We just barely started writing code for it. And we weren't using Wolfenstein, we have to write a whole new engine. We're going to do everything from ground up. Best game in the world is happening right now, everybody. And it was just nuts that we did that, but it was pretty funny.
It creates accountability, right? It's like, well, now
then we have to do it, right? Exactly. And I think the only thing that we did not do was cinematics. That was one of the bullet point lists. But everything else I think we did on that list. And it was funny that multiplayer wasn't in the game until the last month, and I just was looking over the list. I was like, oh shit, dude, we didn't do multiplayer yet. And John's just like, oh yeah, that would be really great.
That little thing.
A few days later, yeah, that little thing. But back then we could pop that out in a few days. So it was pretty crazy.
It's amazing, and I keep wanting to ask generic questions for anyone who lives under a rock and isn't familiar with Doom, but for you, and you personally, what was the reception of Doom like? And more long-term too. I mean, it's got to be pretty life-changing to go from having success making a video game to creating pop culture that, has changed the world and become, a word that everyone's familiar with. Yeah, what was that time like for you after releasing Doom and the reception it received?
It was insane. It really was. We were in the center of a massive hurricane and had to deal with all these incomings. Wolfenstein was really great. We had so much going on after Wolfenstein, and we thought that that's what it was going to be like. It was another planet. It was so, there were really, when we shipped the game, there was only 6 of us that made Doom. There was 5 of us who made Doom until Tom left, and we replaced Tom with 2 people. So it was 5 of us making Doom until that point. Then it was 6. And on top of that, we had maybe 4 people on top of that. doing other work in the office, like Biz Guy and Donna and stuff. But like having all these incomings, everybody wanted to interview us. They wanted to talk to us. They wanted us to support the peripherals. They wanted, like the list goes on. Like there's hint books; those need to be proofed. We need to license our cover. There was a massive hurricane, and it took so much work. And like we immediately start working on Doom 2 while the hurricane is now right. Yeah, for me, obviously, for me personally, it was life changing. Pretty much for all of us in the company, it was life changing. Got my mom a car, got my dad a house, paid for colleges, got houses for other family. So it was really, it was pretty amazing, But it was really to go from poverty to insane was amazing, but it was incredible. But I'm super grateful for it, and I could actually help people. The echo of that 30 years later, the things that game did, and Quake after that, depending on how you were exposed to our stuff, turned people into developers. A lot of developers, that were inspired by it. I'm just blown away when I talk to people nowadays. They're like, "You're the reason why I'm making games today," and I'm like, I can't take credit, but like, wow, it's like because the game did that. It was it's great to go to conferences and meet up with fans or meet up with developers. They tell me like these moments that they've had with playing with their dad, playing Doom with their dad co-op, or playing on his lap or whatever, and it's like their dad's not around anymore, so like it's a really precious memory. I just love hearing people's stories about what the games meant to them, and developers, how it changed their life and made them want to make games. There's a lot of those people. I just got back from a dev conference in Finland, and the number of people there that were just like, here's how it changed my life, this is why I did it. It's kind of too much. It's too much. I'm just like, thank you very much. That's all I can say. I'm glad that the game made you want to make games. That's awesome. The more people, the better,
Yeah, I was tempted to ask about that because obviously Doom and Quake especially have created a whole generation of video game developers. I mean, like I said, I worked on Half-Life, which was via Team Fortress Software, and that ended up being its own thing and ended up 10-year development cycle. I think Duke Nukem 4 was the only thing to outshadow that. But I guess the difference was Team Fortress wasn't so public about it, so people weren't aware that 1996 was when we started on that game. I was only on it for about 8 months, and then I decided to venture off and do other stuff. That's just it. Like, you look at Ritual and every other video game company at the time, it's just everyone's chasing that. And like, I guess for you, like, what was that like? Whether it was seeing Ken's Labyrinth with Ken Silverman, I think
of course,
it was
yeah,
years old, but all these other people kind of following that genre and kind of reinforcing it into its own genre by wanting to create the next Doom or the next Quake. Like, was that pretty flattering to kind of see people kind of right behind you trying to overshadow?
It was totally incredible. I wanted to play someone else's 3D shooter so badly. Like, that's why I got Raven involved. It's like, I want to play more games like this. Can you guys make one? And when I knew that that LucasArts was coming out with the Dark Forces game, I just like so happy to know that. Like, they showed me while they were developing the game, and I was at CES in Chicago, and I was just manning the booth, and someone came over and got me, and said, I got something to show you, and I go into their tent, and they show me Dark Forces. I'm just like, oh my god, I can't wait to play this. This is gonna be so great, because that we did not have this competitive thing at id. Like, we love playing games, we love making games, and we love telling people how we make games, like sharing the information, sharing the techniques that we know, because we knew that time we'd made so many games that we knew that our group of people with an idea will make a different game than another group of people with the exact same idea. It will never turn out the same, right? So they'll both be games that probably we would both like, And so we never were precious with hiding information or being stealthy or anything. We openly tell Andre Lamothe everything we know about how Wolfenstein's raycasting works, so he could write his first book, and then he comes back and we tell him how Doom works, and like, like we were super open with all of our stuff. But yeah, and when I was a developer coming up, I really looked up to people like Steve Wozniak and Nasser Jabeli and Bill Budge, and like those people blew me away with what they had created in the early 80s, and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to make the stuff that they had made, stuff like that. But I think that's what Doom and Quake did to a lot of other people. They saw that and they wanted to do that,
You mentioned a game dev conference in Finland and Steve Wozniak. I was actually speaking at a few conferences a while back in Finland, and I was in Helsinki, and Steve Wozniak was meant to be the next speaker after me at this game developer conference. And I was so excited because I was like, cool, I'm going to share the stage with Steve Wozniak. And there's still a photo of me next to him as a giant screen because I didn't realize that he was just Skyping in. So
oh no,
let down from going from like, I'm so excited to like, oh wait, it's just a fucking stream. So yeah.
He is so busy. That's probably why. He's incredible. If you ever got to hang out with him and talk to him, he is so up to date on every single technology that's happening right now. But he's super humble. He doesn't talk about what he has. He doesn't talk about really what he does unless you ask him about it. Like, can you tell me about what it was like on the plane flight back from Hawaii when you needed to write the ROM code for the disk 2 interface that was going to change personal computers because finally there's a disk drive now available. And that was just incredible effort that he made on that. He wrote some of the most important code on a plane from Hawaii, and it changed everything. And most people don't even know that because they don't know the impact of what it meant to be using discs instead of tape. Tape was horrible, and everything changed because he spent that time on the plane coming back. He had to hurry too.
I guess just to jump around a little bit, like when you're transitioning from Doom, obviously being a 2D for building levels, to Quake, what was that transition like? I'm just curious, obviously, because my background mostly 3D, so like I feel like anything in 3D just ends up taking 3 times as long, not twice as long. So like, what was that experience like transitioning from like a 2D floor plan to having to create worlds in 3D? Was there, not just for you but for everyone else, was there a bit of a major learning curve? Or
the learning curve was the data structure, it was just a brush. It's just you put a block in the world and you put a light in the world, and those were the basic things of Quake, was a light and a brush. That's it. So it was really easy to understand what we needed to do, but being able to do that at speed was the biggest problem, because I wrote the editor and I did not have time to make Alias, right? I had the time to make an editor that could do 3D, but obviously, like, we had never seen a full 3D editor before.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, well, it'll be top down like Doom, but we'll have 3D. So we're going to need to somehow select the brushes when they're stacked. So we came up with a Z view and dragging around a cursor kind of thing that was an X. And when you drag the X over any location, it'll show all the brushes vertically in the Z view, and then we can drag those brushes up and down in that view. It's so time intensive, right? Because we had no other view. It wasn't like you could do side view now. It was only top down. So that door, when you come down the ramp in E1M1, and the door that goes like that, or even the ramp that you come down, that ramp, when you see it in Quake, Ed, it is a rectangle, but it's an angled rectangle. So what I had to do is I had to like draw it from the side, and I had to slice it diagonally so you see a triangle. I had to rotate it a couple times to get it actually in the correct position, then use the Z thing to drag it down to like the front of the slipgate, and every brush in the whole game had to go through that.
Yeah.
Had to go through slicing, rotating, and up and down, getting it in place. So anything vertical was a lot of work because of the Z stuff.
It's almost like you got to physically build every door, everything. But again,
and
like,
light it.
And light it as well. Well, was it radiosity or how did the light baking work back then?
Yeah, it was. So you place a light. There was a light program, and the light program would basically take a light point, and it would basically raycast out, bounce off walls and everything. And if there was a viz leak, then the nice thing is that it would actually save out a point file, so you could follow the leak out the geometry.
Cool.
That was really nice.
I'd be walking around looking for that gray void behind.
Oh my God, that's no way. When we were doing that at the beginning, I told John, no way, dude. I need to know where it's at. You're wasting our time. It's so long to just make a room. We need to iterate. So he put in a point system everywhere it was tracing, and everywhere it was traveling, he's throwing points out. So that made it really nice, faster. Now, one of the things that could have been better is if we had a bounding box, if I could draw a box and say, I'm only editing this, I only want to see what's in this box and don't show me any of the level outside that box, then I could have just focused on a room or a floor or something. We did that later. We edited the Quake Ed later to do that. It ate up a lot of time making those maps, and we were making them as fast as we could. So we got good at it. We got really good at making those maps, at high speed. But yeah, putting the points, making some cool geometry that when you put a light behind it, the light traces would cast shadows, and then it's like generating light map data, on all the different textures in the room. That gave the game a unique look that no one else had. Because of that, there was a lot of restructuring of the internal engine data structure for how it represents the texture maps and the light maps and how it puts them together and all that. We have to come up with a texture cache and all.
Yeah, and all the other.
Yeah, mip mapping was another factor. Yep.
Yeah.
And this is pre-video card. No video cards, right?
That's right. It's all software back then. Yeah, and it's crazy now to look back at all that and just kind of see, in some ways, how far video games have come. And at the same time, I guess for you, as you kind of went down that path of, maybe you weren't thinking about it with Wolfenstein, but Doom and Quake, were you ever having that vision of 20 years from now, what's it going to be like? And I guess where we're at now, is that met that expectation, or did you expect some holograms and everything else, which we're not too far off with?
Well, while we were working on Quake, we were also defining the pipeline for 3D cards. So we were in touch with Matrox and NVIDIA and some other video card manufacturers that were still creating the very first video cards. Basically came to us and were like, what do you want to feed to us? And we're like, display lists. Let me show you what a display list needs to look like. So we were defining the pipeline that eventually everyone would start using. And, eventually there's geometry calculations on the card, all these cool things we could offload. But at the very beginning, it was just the display list, the polygons, the vertices and all that stuff. And then in 1997, finally the Monster 3D card comes out and the world changes. And you have colored lighting and all this stuff, but that was all the work that we'd done a year before to be able to get to the point where it's easy for us to shift from our thing over to the other, because we didn't have to have a weird format to figure out how to pump into their API.
When it comes to the mod community, what was that like? Obviously Doom had already done that to a certain extent. There's millions of WODs out there, but for Quake, what was that experience like, seeing people build actual video games or total conversions? And just for me, that obviously was a huge life changer. From your perspective, kind of seeing your baby then spawn many generations.
We were so happy because Quake C was a real game changer, right? Because of the de-hacked stuff that had to happen in Doom, the fact that you could fully program Quake, you could make it a completely different game, And Scourge of Armagon was a really great pack that came out in the Action Quake, that Avatar build. Just the Ranger, the videos, people are doing machinima, it's
Lone
all
Ranger,
this stuff.
Red vs. Blue.
Yeah, Lone Ranger. Yeah, the Rangers. Do you remember Dank and Scud?
I was trying to remember Dank and Scud.
Cartoons. All of that stuff was just they're using our game for creativity, and that's what it was about. That's why we put Quake C in there. So there was nothing that we were holding people back from doing. The limitations were the lighting model and just the basics of the geometry and all that, but like you could make entire games with that, like brand new games that have nothing to do with Quake. And that's what we were hoping people would do, you know, just go wild. And that created so many opportunities for people to get more into development than the limitations of Doom, and to really like learn how to code in this cool Quake C language that was really easy to understand. And you know, with even our code as examples, our progs were examples for people to look at. You know, it's like, oh, that's how you do the platforms traveling between points and doing a cool ride through levels or whatever. We were really happy with what people did with it. It was exactly what we wanted people to do, and it was cool to see it happen.
I was on a panel with John Carmack, I think it's 2011, and we ended up getting into a big argument about burnout, because he kept saying that all you need is sleep. And I kept saying, because for me, I always felt like, you know, you could have all the sleep you want and leave work, come in the next day, and it just feels like that time just disappeared. But having that distraction of passion or something outside of work that excites you, really kind of rejuvenates you a little bit and kind of gives you that, fights that depression of like going back in every day over and over. And I realized at the same time he's way smarter than me, but I'm like, you're wrong. But I think for you guys, obviously you've done the gauntlet many times with doing late nights and working excessive sprints. So I was kind of curious, like for you working with personalities like Carmack, like what was that like back then? Obviously, you know, like everyone on the team being amazing at what they do. Him, obviously, you know, I feel like stands in his own genre for innovating in 3D engines. Like, what was that like? Yeah, just in general, like working with different personalities who maybe have different visions or opinions, and how was that navigated?
John, obviously, there's no one like Carmack. You're not going to find anyone like him. He's super unique. Different people have different abilities, obviously. Like, we were like that all the time. Like, we were so excited about making games. And I think one of the things that even having made games for a long time before meeting John, like I'd been making games for 10 years before meeting John, and John had been making games for a long time, but making games together with someone else isn't just the best thing ever, right? Especially if they have the ability and the focus and the passion. If you find someone that has those things that match yours, you have like the best team ever. And we worked exceptionally well together because of that. Like the very first month we started working together, I was surprised because I was like, this is amazing. He is just so focused and doing this so fast. He was getting so much time to learn what he wanted to learn. And anyway, it was crazy. It was just I keep on saying that, but it was amazing to work with him. You know, it's totally different now, obviously, but we were so excited. We couldn't wait to do it every day. Like right now, I have programmers on my team that love what they do. If we went on a vacation together, they would want to code.
Yep.
And if they couldn't code, they'd want to talk about coding, right? But yeah, it's not sustainable. Obviously, people go through different stages of life. They have families and they have different things that they're interested in over time. So it's not sustainable for people forever. But you know, now games really take years to make. And like when we're talking about that time period of say Doom, it was 1 year. Quake was 1.5 years. You know, because of these long time periods, you now have to really pace yourself because you can't do that every day for that much time and somehow still be fresh and have new cool ideas when you're just like burning like that. But we were energized. We were in the lead and we knew that we needed to keep going, but we never felt like that's what we were doing. We were just so excited about what we're making that we just spent the amount of time that we needed to do that. You know, we didn't feel like we were doing something wrong. We were just working. We were just making a game, you know?
Yeah, and I think having that passion for it, it's different to someone who's just clocking in every day. It's
super different.
What a drag! I got to go to sleep. Like, can I just skip that part and get back to it?
Yeah. That's when you're just in love with game development. You know, when you're just like, that's how you are.
Obviously, you've got a book coming out, and congratulations, by the way. I was curious, like, when did you decide it was time to write an autobiography?
Probably 4 years ago. I was at I was giving a talk at a conference in Canada, and normally I talk about like talk about Quake, talk about Doom, talk about id Software's programming principles, that kind of stuff. And they said, you know what? We want to hear about your life before and during, but like, can you tell us what was it like to who was this person who made these games? Where did you come from? What was your life like before you started programming games? And then like, how does that feed into the game creation? So I told this, I did this talk, and people were just like stunned because I basically was like, I grew up in the desert. There were scorpions and tarantulas and rattlesnakes. My family was selling drugs. They were getting murdered. We had no money. It was just all kinds of stuff they didn't expect. They were just like, whoa. And because they were surprised, it was just like, I should probably get that down somewhere, not just in a talk, but like put it in a book where I'm talking about, and I'm at the same time, things happen at the same time when I'm thinking about things. Game history book, id Software game history. That is the de facto book to go to, with every date in it, the name of everything, how things happen in development. That's really not out there anywhere. Like someone who worked on Doom, what was it like working on Doom when you're in the team of only 5 of us at the beginning? And so it's just like, yeah, let's write that book, put all this stuff in the beginning about how I grew up, how we moved to Northern California, how I was exposed to computers, and everything that happened after that point. And also just like, people want to know more about things that they haven't heard enough about. Like, I want to know what happened at Iron Storm, and what did you do after Iron Storm? In what about Black Room? So all that stuff.
Literally every single thing I just skipped over because I wanted to ask you, but again, time.
And like, I want to know everything about Black Sabbath, right? I want, Martin, I think his name is Martin Popoff is the guy, right? He's like the #1 chronicler of heavy metal. But it's like, I would want to get people that are id fans or whatever. This is like all the information that they could know really about everything that happened during those years, and the business decisions that were made, the bad decisions that were made, and just the things that happened. I think one of the biggest things about the book is that it's a positive book. This is looking back. This is retrospective too. I'm looking back at a 20-year-old from 55, and just like, this is why we made these decisions. Would have made a totally different decision if I knew what I did now, but we were kids. And so this is how things went. But just the fact that people want to get the book, I'm really honored that people want to read about our games in my past. And I think what comes across in the book that people that I think is great, just like the same thing, that it's almost like modding, where people can be creative, right? In this book, I feel when people read this book that they're going to feel that they could do the same thing that I did, because there's nothing in there that's magic. It's like, I came from nothing, and I just focused on stuff and worked, especially because I'm indigenous, Latino. There were no computers where I was growing up, no way. But people who are neurodivergent, people that come from difficult backgrounds, they'll see that in this book and feel like they can do it. I think that's one of the biggest messages, is just like, anyone can do this. If you want it, you can. Here's a story about how you can do it. No matter who you are, what you can do, you just got to want to do it and start doing it.
It's so important because again, I think that it's kind of what we're talking about before with naivete. A lot of people talk themselves out of something rather than just doing it, and at the same time, like, mirroring other people. It's like, well, if they've done it, why can't I do it? And I think that that's so powerful, that people can look at someone else, and once you peek behind the curtain, it isn't this magic or this person just was born with massive amounts of skill. It was earned, but it was a trade-off of time and focus, so it's really—
That's what it is. It's time and focus. Having access to computers was important. I did not have access to computers, so that's probably the biggest thing in there. But you can learn how to design games on paper. There's lots of board games out there, and those are really great for introducing mechanics to people and thinking about mechanics. And you can innovate on paper.
I was chatting with Jordan Mechner a few years back.
I love Jordan.
he's again, Prince of Persia was a huge inspiration for me too. And when I realized it was in Paris, and I was visiting Paris quite a lot, so I ended up starting to chat with him and went from there. But I think he mentioned that you were the one who convinced him to donate all of his materials and everything from Prince of Persia to a
The
video game museum, I think. Or
strong museum of play in New York, in Rochester, New York. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's you will not believe it. If you ever get to go, you go to Rochester, New York, um, easily can introduce you to them. You will, there's nothing like it in the world. You will not believe your eyes when you go there. It is, you'll know that that is exactly where everything should go. Like, this is where game development materials should go. If you want stuff to be kept around forever, that's the place.
I have to check it out
It's
for sure.
amazing. It's amazing.
Um,
Yeah.
and just really quickly, because again, I know that you're big on community. Like, how important do you think it is to give back and to, yeah, to help younger generations grow as well?
Critical. I mean, that's almost like it's almost like the reason why you're doing what you do. You know, it's to inspire other people that are going to be around and you won't. They got to carry the message and do the same for other people. That's just civilization. So, you know, I work with lots of kids from backgrounds like mine, underrepresented people. I give talks. They kind of they might not see themselves in games because of where they come from or where they're at, and I just tell them, here's what you can do. This is how you can get there. You know, and it's funny because sometimes these kids they can't relate to it, but if you tell them, yeah, you can have a Ferrari, you want one? This is the path that you need to go on to get to that, and it's like, whoa, really? Yeah, there's a space to give back, and that's something that I think everyone should do.
Absolutely. What's next for you? Obviously, you've got your book coming out. You're in Ireland these days. What's next for John Romero?
I've been working on a first-person shooter for a while now. Got a big publisher. It's using Unreal 5, and I can't say anything else about it.
Fair enough. Where can people go to find your book, Doom Guy: Life in First Person?
Basically, go to your local bookseller. You know, go local, support local. So and it's going to be anywhere. It's with a major publisher, Abrams Books, and they're all over the world. So if you go to your local bookstore, if they don't have it, tell them to order it. They'll bring them in there, and you'll keep them in business.
Excellent. No, I love that. It's such a important message that, you know, I think most of us just instantly jump to Amazon and don't blink twice. So yeah, so critical. Yeah. I used to love going to comic book stores and all the used bookstores back in the day when I was a kid, just to
Oh
read.
yeah,
I couldn't afford it.
it's got an audiobook too. I did the audiobook.
Yeah, I just ordered it, well, pre-ordered it last night. So I'm reading the book right now, but I figure that could be a good second read. So no, this is really great, and I'll make sure to link to everything in the show notes. But thank you so much. This has been an absolute honor.
All right, thank you very much. Honored to be on your show.